Welcome to Northwest Newsweek. We begin the second half of our year in review with a tragic story from Ignace. In July, a young family was shattered after a collision on Highway 17 west of the community left 3 people dead. OPP responded to a motor vehicle collision involving a pickup truck and a garbage truck on the afternoon of July 15th. All 3 fatalities, a father and 2 sons, were the occupants of the pickup. The driver of the garbage truck was taken to the Dryden Regional Health Center with injuries. The crash closed the highway for almost 7 hours while investigators pieced together the incident, causing traffic to be rerouted at the Chappaqua and Atikokan highway turnoffs. A GoFundMe campaign had been started by members of the family to cover the cost of the funerals. Initially, the goal was $25,000, but that amount was quickly exceeded by donors. In less than 1 year, the embattled Northern First Nation community of Pikangikum will no longer be running off of diesel power. In August, the Minister for Indigenous Northern Affairs Canada, Carolyn Bennett, announced the federal government will be helping fund the project to bring a power transmission line to the community. Adam Riley has the details on the $60 million investment.
The Government of Canada is investing, today we're announcing, up to $60 million to bring safe, reliable electrical power to Pikangikum.
It's a long-awaited announcement from the federal government for a community that's been forced to live off of a diesel generating station. The power system in Pikangikum has been at capacity for over 10 years and often suffers brownouts and brings feelings of dread to the community once winter sets in. Chief Dean Owens says this 117-kilometer transmission line from Red Lake will lead to a prosperous future for his community.
Thrilled about having heard that our project had been given the green light. It was a go. So that immediately caused an effect for myself to say that this certainly demonstrates hope for our youth and our generations to come.
It's part of a deal with Watay Power, the company that's trying to bring transmission lines to 22 First Nations in the Northwest. Pikangikum will be the first to be hooked onto the provincial grid, with construction starting this fall and finishing about a year later. Bennett says this will not only be an asset for Pikangikum, but also for the entire region.
It's a lot of money. It's $60 million. This is out-of-cycle budget funding that took the finance minister, the prime minister, to agree to do. This was a priority for this community, but for the region. And I think the region, and I think Margaret and others would say that the region felt that to make this first step of Pikangikum was a very significant gesture.
Watay Power CEO Margaret Quinekanash says they are now looking at selecting a contractor for the project, but she says timing is key to having the project completed by November of 2018.
They have to mobilize right away after that in order to utilize the winter this year, because if we miss that window of opportunity, then we'll have took a step back in terms of the timelines that we've already committed to build that line.
This announcement comes 3 weeks after the Government of Canada announced a $2 million grant to help train workers to build the transmission lines. Quinekanash says the federal funding will cover the cost of bringing the line to the community. However, a further $7 to $8 million would be required to upgrade the line to 115 kilovolts in order to connect the other communities planned for the overall project. Adam Riley, TBT News.
In early fall, the province of Ontario announced that it had taken a major step towards developing the right of fire. Premier Kathleen Wynne made the announcement in Thunder Bay for an east-west road from Pickle Lake to the Chromite-rich mining area. The project would also allow the communities of Webequie and Nibinamik to the provincial road network. Molly Fromer has more.
We have reached an agreement to build a road into the Ring of Fire. We have reached that agreement.
Premier Kathleen Wynne, alongside Ministers Michael Gravel, Bill Morrow, and David Zimmer, were all in attendance for this big announcement. The Ring of Fire is one of the largest mineral discoveries of the past century. And now, after years of talk, Ontario is planning an east-west road from Pickle Lake, which will also be connected to a pair of remote communities, Webequie and Nibinamik. Wynne says this announcement would not have been possible without the help from route studies by the First Two Nations.
as a result of the report, there isn't yet a full consensus among all of the First Nation leadership on exactly what the route forward should be. But what I said and what our government said to the First Nations was where there were willing communities who did see an opportunity and did have agreement in their communities about how to move forward in partnership with government, in partnership with industry, that we would move on those roads.
An opportunity for other Winnipegs as well too, connecting to the mainstream society, and also to address some of the high cost of living in our communities.
The two communities are working to begin an environmental assessment of these projects by January of next year, if all goes as planned.
Well, the feasibility work starts today, and we hope to have shovels in the ground the beginning of 2019. We continue to hope that the federal government will see the importance of a project of this scope and that they will step up, but we have been very clear we're going to move ahead regardless of their commitment.
The president of Noront Resources, which has been working to develop its Eagle's Nest nickel mine and its chromite deposits in the Ring of Fire, was very pleased with the news.
This is the announcement that changes everything. The mineral deposits in the Ring of Fire are bulk and base metal deposits. So that means, unlike gold or diamonds, you need roads, 24/7, 365, all-season accessible roads to get the products to market. And without that, these projects aren't viable.
The province is also supporting Martin Falls First Nation to plan a north-south access road connecting that community to the provincial highway at Nakina. Funding for the roads is part of the government's commitment to invest $1 billion into the Ring of Fire infrastructure. Molly Fromer, TPT News.
And days after the Premier's announcement, criticism came in from several groups, including a pair of Mattawa chiefs calling the announcement premature and other chiefs claiming they were not included in the talks to build the road. A report from the Ontario government says the province is pushing the twinning of Highway 17 between the Manitoba border and Kenora back until 2021. This revelation came as a shock to Kenora MP Bob Nault, who was under the belief that the project had the full support of the province. This summer, he expressed his disappointment in a letter to Premier Kathleen Wynne, saying that the livelihoods and lives of Northerners are at stake. Adam Riley has more.
I feel very much betrayed by the Premier and her ministers.
Strong words from Kenora MP Bob Nault over the province's delay on the twinning of Highway 17 West between Kenora and the Manitoba border. Nault says the recent release of the Northern Highways Program report is an affront to all the efforts made in recent years to bring the parties together.
This has been on the books for 8 years. This was a commitment made by the Harper government and the McGuinty government, and the funding was going to be joint between the federal provincial government. All that was already agreed to. It's the issue of delay, and not being able to work with the partners here in the region. But quite frankly, I dealt with that for them over the last year.
Nault says despite being given assurances by the province that the twinning is a high priority, this report says otherwise.
And now they've just punted it off to 2021, which of course is long after the next election, and so that's just not acceptable to Northerners.
Kenora Mayor Dave Canfield echoes Nault's feelings on the matter, saying the four-laning should have been done years ago.
You know, it's the entranceway into Ontario. It's the only entranceway from Western Canada and the Western U.S., and you come into a two-lane highway, which quite often is shut down because of accidents, and we've had a few deaths there this summer already. To put that off is completely unacceptable.
Mr. Nault's letter drew further attention to the fact that we're all working hard together to make this happen.
The Ministry of Transportation has completed the route planning and the design and engineering work in a 15-kilometer section closest to the border. That's according to Northern Development Minister Michael Gravel, but he says for the whole project there are still some barriers yet to be overcome.
We're absolutely committed to making sure that this project moves forward, and it does require us to make sure that the proper consultations do take place. Also with private landowners, there's issues related to the Trans-Canada Pipeline. There's a number of other issues in terms of the route planning study.
Gravel says the Northern Highways program continues to be a top priority for the government. But depending on who has control of the legislature after next year's provincial election, it's safe to say that priority could increase or decrease. Adam Riley, TBT News.
We're going to take a short break, but coming up next, we get closer to the end of 2017 with a pair of announcements that sent economic shockwaves through the Northwest. Northern development continued to be a theme in 2017 as some Mattawa communities received news they had been waiting for 7 years for. In October, the federal and provincial governments announced they will be providing a combined $69 million to connect 5 remote Mattawa communities to high-speed fiber optic internet. Mattawa chiefs are calling this a historic moment that will bring big changes to the affected communities. Xiaoli Li has details.
For the federal and provincial governments, delivering the nearly $70 million to connect 5 remote communities to fiber optic internet is about giving First Nations a chance to thrive.
This fiber backbone will go to 36 different institutions, and the last mile support will provide high-speed internet access to 610 households, and we believe this is really critical.
To have equal access to the high-speed internet is hugely important to the communities themselves in terms of keeping in contact with each other, but also opening up economic development and social opportunities for them.
The money, $39 million from Ottawa and $30 million from the province, will be delivered to Rapid Links, a regional telecom established by Mattawa to build and maintain an 881-kilometer fiber optic network. Buried fiber optic cable from Wonneman Lake will connect to Nabinimik, Niskantaga, Abamatung, Martin Falls, and Webequie First Nations. Those communities were part of an earlier provincial plan to connect remote reserves to fiber internet in 2010. However, funding ran out and the 5 were dropped from the project. With Friday's announcement, not only will those communities be connected to fiber internet, they'll be among the first reserves with fiber to the home.
That is a transformational part of the project because I don't think that there are any other First Nations in Ontario with fiber to the home. So our 5 remote communities will be setting a precedent there.
Chiefs from Niskantaga, Abamatung, and Martin Falls welcome the announcement. The communities rely on internet for many services, including banking, education, entrepreneurship, and healthcare. Elizabeth Atlukin is chief of Abamatung First Nation and says when her community was gripped by a prescription drug crisis in 2010, counseling and support on the ground had to be matched with support delivered through the internet.
Because we had such a high level of membership that required this aftercare, And we did not have the money to be able to send our clients to go out of our community. We're remote. We needed something like this, telepsychiatry, telemedicine.
Mattawa officials say they're working on network design and engineering now. If environmental approvals and permitting go smoothly, construction could start as soon as May 2018. Xiaoli Li, TBT News.
The cancellation of the Energy East pipeline project prompted mixed reactions around the Northwest. TransCanada first proposed the idea in 2013 to add nearly 1,500 kilometers of new oil pipelines from Alberta to the Maritimes with an investment of $16 billion. Many area municipal leaders were disappointed by the announcement, but local environmentalists celebrated the project's demise. Christina Jung reports.
The proposed Energy East pipeline project would have seen over 1 million barrels of oil being carried across the country every day. The project would have converted an existing natural gas pipeline running through northwestern Ontario to carry crude oil. NOMA President Wendy Landry say they're disappointed to see the cancellation of the project. With 28 municipalities in the Northwest living no more than 100 feet away from rail lines with trains carrying crude oil, Landry says this is now a major safety concern.
There's been tragedies that have happened, and we want to make sure that our members are protected, and safety is the utmost importance. And it's disappointing today, but that's where we'll go from here, as we will make sure that we are at the ear of the feds, making sure that we are able to control some aspect of safety of those cars coming through our municipalities.
Landry says since the decision to transport oil by pipeline is now off the table, they'll be asking the federal government for support to add speed limits near local rail crossings. Meanwhile, a network of local environmental groups say they're relieved to see the Energy East cancelled. Citizens United for a Sustainable Planet representative Paul Berger says the investment towards Energy East did not make sense economically or environmentally.
That would be like opening all of Ontario's coal-fired generating plants again. That would be the greenhouse gas impact, like putting 7 million cars on the road. So a massive greenhouse gas impact just from getting the stuff out of the ground and processing it. Of course, much more when it's burned as well. So it's 2017 now. We simply can't be building massive fossil fuel infrastructure and meet our Paris climate commitments, which are weak to begin with. We really have to be moving quickly to a green energy economy.
Berger says the technology for a greener economy using renewable energy has already been developed, with countries like Uruguay and Germany using renewables for 95% of their electricity. With that said, Berger says it's up to community members and residents of Thunder Bay to put the pressure on our local government representatives to make a change for a greener, carbon-neutral economy. Christina Jung, TBT News.
Residents of North Caribou Lake First Nation finally have an all-season road to their community. This year, the federal government invested $5.1 million into a new bridge which links the community to a road leading to Pickle Lake. In November, Anishinaabe Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler joined members of the community to open the new bridge over the Narrows on Round Lake. It means the community will no longer be dependent on the winter road network. The opening of the bridge comes at a time when some winter roads are only open for a month each winter, increasing the cost of supplies in the community.
Significant development for Weeagamaw Lake, for them to be able to become a road access community. Hopefully that will alleviate some of the cost of living up there, the cost of goods, the cost of fuel, once they begin to utilize the all-season road. So it's obviously a huge step and a positive one for sure.
And coming up after this final break, we conclude our recap of 2017 with a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women. Welcome back. Mayors and representatives from several logging communities in the Northwest put their foot down this year in Toronto, speaking on behalf of the forestry industry and against the actions of environmental groups. They say those groups have waged a campaign to stop forestry companies from continuing to operate in Ontario. Adam Riley has more.
Quite frankly, that we are fed up with being portrayed as a region that has no regard for the sustainability of our environment that we live in, that we have lived in, and that we intend to live in for generations to come.
NOMA President Wendy Landry is pulling no punches when it comes to fighting environmental groups protesting against communities relying off of forestry. She says since September, anti-forestry activists such as CPAW's Wildlands League and the David Suzuki Foundation have been portraying the industry and several northern communities as forest destroyers and have lobbied the government into legislation that would have a disastrous impact on the sector and the 57,000 people it employs in the region.
We are forestry and we are the subject matter experts. This is our backyard, and we deserve a say in the policy that governs our backyards.
Landry says in 2007, lobbyists forced the government to pass what she says is an unimplementable Endangered Species Act and used the woodland caribou as a species of interest. Landry was joined by representatives from several of the communities who are deeply invested in the forestry sector, such as Red Rock Indian Band Chief Edward Wawier.
The fact that the government has not meaningfully engaged or informed our communities is appalling, given the unknown impacts these policies could have within our jurisdiction.
Kenora Mayor Dave Canfield says his community has been a part of the forestry sector for almost 150 years. He points out some concerns with Ontario's Environment Commissioner's recent Good Choices, Bad Choices report released last month, adding most environmental groups say once you clear-cut an area, woodland caribou never go back. Canfield disputes that claim.
These dots, this is a clear cut, them red dots are caribou. They're actually collared caribou or spotted in GPS by some of the woodlands people that work in the bush. $11 million spent by the Ontario government, Ministry of Natural Resources, to show this. We know that. We're there every day. And we're sick and tired of listening to the misinformation and the lies that are coming out of people that don't even know or walk the walk that we do.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
And in December, the hearings for the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls arrived in Thunder Bay. For several days, the proceedings brought raw emotions out of those testifying, and at one point, even from one of the inquiry commissioners themselves. They say its mandate doesn't go far enough. Shally Lee has more on that and the testimony given by survivors, friends, and family of those missing women.
In some ways, inquiry commissioners are like judges, able to issue subpoenas under the Inquiries Act and enforce them. But you don't usually see this kind of emotion from a judge.
The system failed, and it's still failing today. Am I going to lose my job because I say that? Maybe. But I'll sleep well.
Testimony at the second day of Thunder Bay hearings for the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women was almost too much for Commissioner Michelle Audette. Audette was hearing testimony from the family of Sarah Skunk, a Mishkegoguming woman missing since 1995 when she was last seen in Thunder Bay. Skunk's sisters say they felt frustrated by the long wait for information. What's more, when a grandniece went missing years later, they were upset by the police response.
I asked the police for help, and I gave them some information. I told them, they asked me what her background was. I told them she was Native. A whole different attitude after that.
After the hearing, Audette clarified her earlier statement, saying inquiries are often long with commissioners that could change.
Maybe I might be, and I said that if I'm not there anymore, as long that the mandate continue, it's not the first inquiry way before us. When the first year is done, do they keep the same commissioner? I have a feeling they will, but it's a political decision, it's not ours.
The inquiry will continue to take testimony in Thunder Bay on Wednesday, with a full day of private hearings scheduled. Shally Lee, TBT News.
And that'll do it for Northwest Newsweek's 2017 Year in Review. Now, starting next week, we'll have a new episode featuring stories that impact you and your communities. From all of us here at Northwest Newsweek, have a happy new year, and we'll see you in 2018.